Hey folks, how you doing? It is Sunday, the 19th of October, 2025. I hope you're all doing well and doing good wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Um, this is another video where I'm going to talk to you about things, and the particular thing I'm going to address in this is what I told you was going to happen. Unfortunately, as I predicted at the time that it was announced at the White House, and even before when the draft proposals of it were presented, was that the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is failing for the very reasons I told you that it would. Hamas has created a group called the Gaza Security Police, which it pretends is some new organization. Of course, it is not. It is literally just an organization in name only, and everybody in it is Hamas. What a shock. And they have now, of course, executed many people in the opposition to Hamas in Gaza. And they said they're doing it to restore order, law and order, as if they have any law and order in their terrorist Hamastan. And they have said that Israel, of course, is to blame for setting up the conditions for them to have had to do that by supplying arms and money and other resources to these opposition gangs that were fighting Hamas alongside Israel during the 2 years of fighting, and that they were accusing those armed gangs of stealing the food, when in fact we know that as much as other armed gangs have taken some food here and there, Hamas has obviously taken the lion's share, which we've seen on video in literally UN warehouses that are controlled by Hamas, and Hamas warehouses that are controlled by Hamas in Gaza. If you remember back in May, when the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, began to deliver food to Gaza, around that time, there was a bit of a riot, shall we say, in Gaza, when average Gazans took to basically looting some of these UN warehouses that were guarded by Hamas, and they found in them massive amounts of food, like enormous quantities. You can see the videos for yourself. Gazans rampaging through there, taking food that deservedly was theirs. They did not have to pay for it. It was meant to be given to them for free. Instead, Hamas was selling it, dribbling it out onto the market, selling it at exorbitant prices, 20, 30, 40 times the actual market value, just to rip off people in Gaza. And at the beginning of this ceasefire, about a week or 10 days ago, Hamas said that they had 3 months worth of food, and the UN confirmed that. So they have plenty of food there. In addition, people in Hamas and Gazans in general have been intentionally crossing over the yellow line. Now, if you know anything about what's happening with what's going on in Gaza, you know that right now the IDF controls Gaza. About 50% of it, the other 50% is under Hamas rule. And that demarcation line is called the yellow line. And people from Gaza are not supposed to cross over that yellow line for any reason. And every time they do, the IDF keeps warning them, hey, stop doing that. This is a violation of the ceasefire, and it could lead to gunfire. They keep ignoring it. They keep crossing. Every 5 minutes, there's warnings blaring saying, do not cross the yellow line. They keep doing it. And yesterday, or 2 days ago, whatever it was, 2 days ago at night, it was Friday night, Saturday morning, Israel time, unfortunately, a minivan or something like that, full of a family, I believe it was 11 people reportedly in the van, crossed the yellow line. Israel warned them, stop, stop, stop. They didn't stop. Israel opened fire because they posed an imminent threat. They didn't know if there were terrorists in the van or not. Lo and behold, of course, there were non-combatants in the van, including men, women, and of course children. And the recovery rescue units have recovered apparently 9 bodies. That's the last time I read it. So, like I said, there's going to be awful, terrible, and even deadly clashes between Gazans, Hamas, and other people in Gaza and the IDF. This is exactly what I told you would happen. It's very unfortunate. It's terrible. But this is a consequence of Hamas still violating the ceasefire in many ways. Also, they have not yet given back all of the hostages, right? There are remains of at least 18 or 17 hostages. If you remember 2 days ago, I told you Hamas said, oh, we've given back all we can find. And Israel said, we know you can give back at least another 10. And here are places where you can look for them. And then Hamas said, no, it's not possible. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu then said, Hamas also demanded that Israel reopen the Rafah corridor, or the Rafah crossing into Egypt. And Israel said, well, we're not going to reopen that until we get all the remains back, according to the agreement. And then a Hamas spokesperson was interviewed yesterday or the day before. I think it was yesterday because it was Saturday. And he said, when asked the question, will Hamas give up weapons and to whom would he give it up? He said, why should we give up weapons and to whom should we give it up? He said, will we give it up to, do they expect us to give it up to Egypt or Israel or who? And then he said, why should we give up weapons first? Why shouldn't Israel give up its nuclear weapons first? The level of cognitive dissonance is insane. And he asked also why Israel doesn't disarm itself, like the entire IDF disarm itself. So Hamas expects Israel to give up our entire military that protects us from terrorists like them, and give up our entire nuclear arsenal, which Israel denies even having, but allegedly has, just so that we can get back the remains of the 18 hostages that they said that they would give us back, and that they would disarm, which they said they would do, and they give up military power, which they said they would do, and leave the political scene, which they said they would do, in the name of following the plan. But of course, since signing that plan, and even before the signing that plan, they said that even though they're signing that plan, or even though they signed it, they do not intend to follow it. Meaning nothing except phase 1 is what they agreed to, even though they signed on the dotted line that says they agree to all of it. And as far as they're concerned, everything in phase 2 and beyond is up for negotiations, even though it literally isn't. And yes, there are things that need to be hammered out, like some details about who will make up the force, what's their chain of command, what's their mission, etc. But they are fully expected to follow that agreement. And the fact that they don't tells you everything you need to do about their intentions and the fact that they're a bad faith actor. Meanwhile, the useful idiots and the pro-Hamas jackasses around the world continue to demonstrate in favor of Hamas. They're not demonstrating in favor of Palestinians. They might tell you they are. In fact, that is what they tell you they're doing. But if you think about it, they're not. Because if Israel were to leave Gaza completely and do what Hamas does and do what Hamas wants, then and let Hamas remain in power, then Israel will be letting Hamas continue to run the roost over the people of Gaza and continue to terrorize them and kill them and do all these other terrible things to them and run the place like a terrorist base, which is exactly what it is at the moment. Which is obviously an insane and stupid thing that Israel should not do. What right-minded country would allow itself to be attacked by a terrorist controlled territory, and not do anything to stop it and get rid of that threat? Right? Think about it. Like, if some region of Mexico that borders the U.S. were to attack the U.S. and do proportionally what Hamas did to Israel, meaning there'd be tens of thousands of wounded and dead and kidnapped and tortured and all this stuff. It's like tens of thousands of victims, right? Or even more. Then you don't think the U.S. would just annihilate that region of Mexico? I mean, they would literally wipe it off the earth. There would be nothing left the next day if those people did not return all the hostages and surrender. Just think about it. Do you really think the U.S., under any president, would actually just sit there and take it? And do you actually think they would go ahead and send troops in to fight for 2 years and try to not kill people and send leaflets and SMSs and emails and make phone calls and send millions or hundreds of millions of tons of food, in that case, to that region to keep them fed and vaccinate them and work out some kind of deal that grants amnesty to the people that did this and free 10 times as many, prisoners that it holds just to get back the hostages? No, the United States would carpet bomb the living shit out of the place. And unfortunately for the hostages, it would mean they would probably be dead. But the U.S. would end that conflict extremely quickly to send a message that you don't mess with the United States in that way ever again. And those people would be all obliterated off the map, and no one would say a bloody word. There'd be no demonstrations. There'd be no anti-U.S. marches. Nothing. There wouldn't be time. But they got their butts off the couch and put down their stupid bongs and drew their stupid posters to go march in the streets. Their friends who were part of that criminal entity, that terrorist entity in Mexico, would be eliminated. But the hypocrisy, the double standard that's held up to Israel is endless. And the reason it's held up to that is because of A, political interests, and B, because the average person, when it comes to this topic, is very poorly informed. I will even say retarded. They do not understand what happens in this region. They have no idea about the complex history. They have no idea about the facts, the very basic facts. They have no idea about the very basic reality, which is when you're fighting against terrorists, you don't mess around. You don't teetotal. This isn't a region for weak people. This is a region where strength matters and where strength is respected. And you may disagree with that way of thinking. And frankly, I may even disagree with that way of thinking, and it doesn't matter. It matters what is. It matters what works. It matters what can succeed. And what can succeed is strength and power. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. That's how it is here. It is not a neighborhood for the faint of heart. Now, does that mean that this place will always be in conflict and violence? I hope not. But historically, there has been a lot of that here. And that's just an ugly fact, an ugly reality. But it's still our homeland. And that's why we choose to live here. Because this is where we're from. And we're very proud of the fact that this is our homeland, as we should be. And the invaders who have colonized this space from the Arab world, sure, many of them have been here for many centuries, and many of them are forced into that culture and ethnicity through forced conversion and intermarriage, etc. So they also have a claim on this land. That's fine. But they have to respect the laws that we have in our country if they want to live side by side in peace and prosperity. If they want to have their own laws in their own country, well, first they have to get a country. And they're not going to get it if they can't live side by side in peace with us. So that's the quick summary of that. And now I'm going to tell you what happens next. But I need a minute, so bear with me, and I will be right back. Okay, back. Um, so what is going to happen next? What's going to happen next, very likely, is that we're going to see a pretty significant amount of violence happening in Gaza in the coming hours, days, and weeks. And it is horribly unfortunate for the people living there. And it is entirely avoidable. But they keep pressing the buttons. They keep pushing Israel to respond exactly like I told you they would do. They keep testing the limits because they want to see whose will can they break first. Are they going to break the will of the United States and or Israel and just, have Israel or the United States just throw up their hands and say, fine, you guys are too tough, we can't beat you? Or are they going to break the will of the Emirates states or Saudi Arabia or other signatories to this party, the Europeans maybe, and make them, force them to demand Israel not retaliate or use proportional force, the usual BS answer that they tell to Israel, and have the UN say, we condemn all the violence and we demand all parties to stop fighting as usual, which they're going to do. And then they'll, of course, run another UN Security Council resolution condemning Israel once again, as they do literally like clockwork practically every day that they meet, because that's all they know how to do, since they're literally just an anti-Israel goon squad in suits. The answer is they're going to try to do all of the above, and they're going to start with the weakest link, which is, of course, the Europeans and various Gulf states like Oman, Qatar. Oman, you might not think that because of the relationship they have with Israel, but yeah, they will try them. And they'll certainly try Qatar and Turkey. And they will also try advancing that notion through the Palestinian Authority at the UN, even though Hamas, of course, is not part of the Palestinian Authority, but the Palestinian Authority dutifully represents Hamas's interests at the UN whenever the hell they feel like it, which is a lot of the time. So that is what's going to happen next. We are going to see a continuation of this war. As I told you, right? I said I am cautiously optimistic, but realistic that this will probably fail. We're already seeing it fail. You're welcome. I told you that this would probably happen. You're welcome, not in the sense of, I'm glad they were No, absolutely not. I wish they would have stuck to the deal. But you're welcome in terms of, I hope you are glad that you were informed ahead of time by me, or yours truly, as they say in formal English. And so that you can see that the information that I give you is in fact correct, accurate, insightful, and that I am able to predict things that happen, not because I have some crystal ball, but because I, like many other people who have a brain between their ears and who understand this topic, am able to analyze this information for you and give you the likelihood of the probabilities of what's going to happen. And unfortunately, once again, I was correct. Believe me, I would love to be not correct about this. Nothing would please me more than to be wrong and to be able to say, hey, this is fantastic. We have a situation where the Gazans have forced Hamas to adhere to the deal and everything's going to go hunky-dory. But that's not happening. It hasn't happened until now. It is not likely to happen in the future anytime soon. I told you the political grifters are probably still getting money from Qatar and from Iran. So far, we have indications that that's the case. And of course, they still get money from the UN paying the people in Gaza and Hamas through their digital wallets every month. So nothing has changed on the ground in Gaza, except for the fact that 20 Israeli live hostages have all come home. And of the 28 that they were still holding on to 10 days ago, Israel has received about 10 or 11 hostages. So there still remain, almost 20, maybe 18 or so, 19, whatever the number is, 18, could be 17 hostages remains in Gaza. And just as importantly, Hamas has not withdrawn from power, has not given up their weapons, and has not withdrawn from the political scene. And I will say, even in a way, it's even more important because, yes, we need closure for the families. It is incredibly important for families to have closure with their hostage, with their remains of their loved ones who are still being held hostage in Gaza. But at the same time, right, to put a kind of analytical view on it, the only hostages remaining are in fact presumed dead, which means, yes, it would be terrible if the hostages' families have to wait longer to get them back. But at this point, the actual priority should be to get rid of Hamas. Because once we do that, then the IDF can, of course, recover the bodies much quicker once the Hamas is gone without any further delays. Yes, it may take more time for that to happen, but at this point, it is most imperative to get rid of the active threat, because that threat, as long as it exists, will attempt to do what they did again and again and again and again, exactly as they said they would. And by the way, they have already tried. No, they didn't mount any attacks as large as October 7th since then. Hello there, I see you. No, they have thousands of people over the border into Israel in a large-scale attack from Gaza or from Judea and Samaria or from any other place. But they have tried to kidnap soldiers at bases in Gaza. They have tried to launch attacks into Israel by sending people from Judea and Samaria into Israel with weapons and with the intention to harm and kill and kidnap people. So that is the most imminent threat that must be dismantled. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the top priority. Yes, recovering the hostages like that is a top priority, but at this point, it is not the top priority and should not supersede the military objectives of the war. Right? At this point, yes, every family member wants to have their loved ones' remains back. I get that. But reaching the military objective of getting rid of Hamas is now the top priority, without question. And Israel should do it, frankly, without hesitation. And should just begin dismantling Hamas immediately. They have had their time. They've had their chance. They've had multiple chances for years. They've been in power there for 20 years. It's now time to get rid of them because they have done nothing but build terrorism as a norm there. And that's given Qatar 20 years to further brainwash idiots around the world and to further foment anger, hate, and terrorist intentions in people who support Hamas around the world. We've seen attack after attack in different places. The Manchester synagogue attacks, the attacks on the embassy workers in Washington, the attacks on the protesters and the demonstrators in Colorado, and on and on and on. There's been no shortage of direct anti-Semitic attacks under the guise of being anti-Israel or anti-Zionist or all that BS, which they call it, which is just straight up anti-Semitism. I don't really care if you agree with that or not. That's what it is. If you don't agree with it, you're a bit of a retard. You don't like the fact that I'm calling you a retard. Stop being one. Hello there. I'm Israel Chai indeed, my brother. I'm Israel Chai. So that's what's happening. And that's what's likely to happen. We are likely to see more fighting. And this time, I hope Israel, frankly, does what it has to do faster and more effectively than we've been restricted to do over the past 2 years. Military pressure worked with diplomatic pressure to get the living hostages back. Unfortunately, it took too long. I believe it could have been done faster, but that doesn't matter. The fact is all the living hostages are home. Yes, we're still waiting for the remains of some of the dead hostages, but what matters more right now is getting rid of Hamas permanently from Gaza. And yes, you can tell me, well, there's just some other group will pop up with a similar ideology. That may be true. But if we demonstrate to them now that we are not messing around and we are not going to allow them to dictate the terms of our victory over them, and that we are going to demand that they surrender or die, well, they will probably learn the lesson, or hopefully they will. Right? Israel must have an outright victory. The time is now. Hope it happens ASAP, and that we get rid of these Hamas bastards once and for all. That'll do it for now. Remember, like, comment, share, and of course, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Shalom.